Hello and welcome. Fighting along the front line continues. Ukrainians are having small advances in the south. There is debate what exactly happened to the Dnipro-Bridghead, and we have a video about the Ukrainian attack on the Crimean Bridge. This and more in the situation report. The Russians started a massive missile attack. As usually, both sides have widely different claims. The Ukrainian side basically claims I think they shot down all but one of the cruise missiles, while the Russians claim they hit several strategic targets, among them Yuzhmash in Dnipro, where they think Krim-2 ballistic missiles are being built and the S-200 surface-to-air missiles are being converted into ballistic missiles. We don't really have much proof. There are some videos of explosions on the horizon, but wherever that explosion happens, I wasn't able to identify. We have news from the northern part of Ukraine, basically the northern front line, if you want to call it this way. Russians are saying there has been an attempt to cross the border here in Bryansk. The attempt was at Kurovichi, which is here. So you can see here between northeast of Chernihiv, basically. Supposedly 6 Ukrainians tried to cross the border. The Russians claim they killed 5 of them and show some videos of corpses and equipment, which I obviously can't show you in this context. On the eastern front, we have continued fighting northeast of Kupiansk. The Russians are trying to push further south, and we have some claims that the Ukrainians are being pushed back towards Kupiansk already. Depending on which military blogger you listen, on the Russian side, there are usually claims that the Russians are close to the outskirts, while the pro-Russian military blogger Voenko shows us a map, and as you can see, they basically show that the furthest extent towards the southwest is at Synkivka, and that Synkivka is still under Ukrainian control. Just to check, this is from August 16th, so from today, which means that according to their map, basically the front line should be further north along this line. While the Russians keep their pressure up, it shows us that they are nowhere close to breaking through. We have reports about Ukrainian attacks at Synkivka, at Novoselivske here, and at Novoihorivka here. In the Liberates, no confirmed successes by the Ukrainians. Some fighting is continuing in the Serebryansk forest as well, but not much change here either. South of the Seversky Donetsk, we have reports about fighting at Bilohorivka, and Ukrainians attacked there. The Russians also attacked there, and there's fighting at Vesele. Also, fighting continues around Klishchivka and Andrivka, but I cannot confirm any change in territory. The Ukrainians are probably still in the southern part of Klishchivka. This isn't fully confirmed, but the decisive part is they are still holding the high ground here over Klishchivka. And from Andrivka, I cannot confirm that they have been pushed away, neither from Kurdiumivka. I do not see any movement here being confirmed. Further south, we have reports at Avdiivka. Ukrainians attacked at Nevelske and at Krasnohorivka. I cannot confirm successes here. And the Russians attacked at Marinka. The same here. No change in territory that can be confirmed. At the Oblast border south of Velika Novosilka, we have now the Ukrainians confirming that Urozhaine has been liberated. In my situational picture from yesterday, I took the Russian sources, and according to them, I confirmed that Urozhaine is liberated. Now the Ukrainians themselves confirm it and claim that they control the complete town. The Russians did some unsuccessful counterattacks, while the Ukrainians were able to advance somewhat in this direction here, west of Staromayorsk. And right now, we are having rumors of ongoing attacks towards the south, here towards Savitne, Bashania, and Staromylnivka. So supposedly the Ukrainians are attacking down here. The Vostok battalion is talking about attacks in the area of Kremenchik, and Voenko is reporting attacks on Novodonetsk. So it seems like the Ukrainians are currently engaged in heavy fighting on that southern part here, on the front line east of the river. I cannot confirm that they have achieved anything in those recent attacks, but we'll find out over the next few days. Close to Urozhaine, we have new video evidence and picture evidence showing that the Ukrainians have actually advanced further south here in this area. We have a Russian video of them shelling Ukrainian positions, which is, as you can see, it's basically south. When we move the line from the southern part of Robotine, they are further south than the town itself. So more or less that should be here. And we have the same here, another video of Ukrainian tanks in combat and being hit. That is further east here. So in this area, generally, we see the Ukrainians have advanced towards this area. We know that they took losses there, but we do not know if they were able to take control of this area. Overall, though, there's not too much change freshly confirmed. The Russians are somewhat inconclusive when it comes to fighting, whether or not the center of Robotine is gray area or Ukrainian controlled or even Russian controlled yet. The most likely is we have video evidence of the Ukrainian side entering the center of Robotine. I cannot confirm that they currently control it, so it's probably contested right now. The Ukrainians are definitely inside of Robotine at this moment. We have a picture that appeared from the Ukrainian side that is showing us a Challenger 2. As you can see, the background is completely blurred out to make it impossible to check where it was, but it shows us the famous cope cage that the Ukrainians installed on the tank. Interesting is I read that they didn't install ERA, that it was visible, but at the same time we see that they blurred out the hull here. So whether that is hiding some ERA that was placed there after all or not, I have no way of confirming. It's just an observation that it looks interesting. And as we said in the yesterday situational picture, with the 82nd Air Mobile Brigade arriving there, it seemed likely that the Challenger 2s are going to be visible on the front line very soon. And basically, when the video was finished, I was made aware of this picture already having appeared. Now, we have no further reports of fighting west of this area here. I can also not confirm current fresh advances south of Robotine. The most interesting part now is the area here across the Dnipro. We talked about the fact that the Ukrainians actually established a bridgehead west of Kosachi Lahiri. They seemingly had entered the town, but were pushed out of it. At least that was most likely. And we now have the Russian side claiming that the bridgehead was completely pushed in and is no longer in existence. As you can see here, Riba is saying that they pushed the Ukrainians completely towards the river. So according to them, this is already done here. We can go back here and them claiming basically that they were able to counterattack, where the Ukrainian forces were densely decked in. After fierce battles, Russian troops completely cleared the left bank of the presence of the armed forces of Ukraine. That's Riba saying, and it's from yesterday. And we have today a Ukrainian military blogger saying that he adjusted it. So I'm not completely sure if he says that they were pushed back or that his maps were just too optimistic, but he's basically saying that the southern part of this island here is contested, whereas the northern is under Ukrainian control, and he more or less puts a line, say, roughly here. So according to him, the Ukrainians are still on the left bank of the Dnipro. For me, there is no way of confirming right now which of the two stories is true. Obviously, it cannot really both of it can't really be true. We'll just have to wait for the next few days how it's going to turn out. That this offensive here is going to turn out to be a major breakthrough, and that the Ukrainians will push in reinforcements into that bridgehead to extend it seemed unlikely. So it seems possible, or fairly possible, that the Ukrainians withdraw at the moment where they saw serious reserves being brought up. But as said, as of now, there's not much to prove actually whether the Ukrainians have lost the bridgehead or not. From the Russian side, we have interesting news towards the rear area of this here, though. There were reports that they brought a big column of military equipment towards Kherson from Mykolaiv. In total, they were talking about roughly 40 artillery pieces and 1,500 men with assault boats. So the Russian side is expecting that the artillery is going to be focused here in counter battery and supporting additional naval operations or river crossings. This obviously 1,500 men supposedly trained in that should allow us to, make us expect that. And there are reports of probable Ukrainian operations along those islands here as well. So we'll have to keep an eye on this in the next few days. The Ukrainians are likely trying to just fix Russians here in place, but they seem to be fairly successful as of now. If we come to the overall situation, we have the Ukrainian armed forces commander of the ground forces, Colonel General Syrskyi. He's basically saying in Kupiansk, he's coordinating the defense, that the Russians keep up big pressure towards the south here, but more or less, to summarize it, the Russians are heavily attacking, but the situation is stable, is dangerous, but it is stable. We could probably summarize. Yeah, in case you want to read it yourself, you can pause the video now. And this is an interesting video from a pro-Ukrainian channel, because what it shows us is a Stridswagen 122. So basically the Swedish version of the Leopard 2A5 that was donated. And we can see the anti-thermal coating cover basically to hide it from thermal cameras. But this isn't the interesting part. The interesting part is this here, which unfortunately doesn't get translated properly. This actually means Crimina. So this would be an example that one of the Western equipped, well-equipped units, we talked about the CV90 in the past, that it's in this area here, showing us that the Russian offensives that they did, both from Crimina, both over the Cheribets, both down to Kupiansk, that those offensives actually achieved their goal, which was likely never to gain huge swaths of territory, to capture Izium again or Kharkiv or anything like this. If you follow this channel for longer, I said basically from the beginning, I don't see much of a point in those attacks except to draw in Ukrainian reinforcements, and we more or less have visual evidence that this part of their plan has succeeded. We have also in the summarizing, we have something, it's 2 days old, but it's still interesting. It's about Klishivka. He's claiming here, Colonel Kassat, Boris Urozhaine is claiming that they are controlling Klishivka. As said, this is somewhat doubted, but the interesting part is he says the situation is unstable due to the control of a number of important forest plantations and heights by the enemy. This is nothing, so overall nothing has changed too much. The problem the Russians are facing here is that the Ukrainians are now in control of the high ground, so they have a good overview of the situation, can see the Russians move and thus obviously engage them, which should keep causing problems to the Russians in Klishivka and should give the Ukrainians hope that in the midterm they will be able to liberate it as well. We have here an article, a comment on Telegram from today, and they are saying the fighting is continuing in Robotine. The enemy uses Striker, so far so good. Artillery is at work, but the situation is assessed in the status of severe. So the Russians are heavily under pressure by those attacks here. This is not much of a surprise. With the 82nd Brigade, the Ukrainians brought in a fresh brigade that is well equipped, but at the same time, while this will likely show us additional successes, it is obviously not a great sign, as this was one of the units that was still kept in reserve, where we were expecting them to be used to exploit any breakthroughs. The Strikers seem to be the perfect choice for this due to their high mobility. This unit has now been deployed in positional fighting around Robotine. They will obviously replace other units that are being refreshed now, that are being re-equipped where equipment is available in the coming times, but that means that the Ukrainians have to push in more and more reserves to even keep the momentum going, to keep the initiative, to prevent a culmination of their offensives. Offensive units that were meant for the breakthrough are already being used along the front line. That's not a great sign. There's no way around admitting that. And we have a good news, though, for the Ukrainian side, and this is the I don't know. I have no idea how I'm supposed to pronounce this. This is a channel that is fairly accurate with its insights and clearly has connections to intelligence agencies in Russia. And they are saying they are having received a memorandum by the former deputy prime minister Dmitry Rogozin, and he's saying he's giving very bad grades for the Russian armed forces. Artillery reconnaissance means are outdated and significantly inferior to Western systems, HIMARS, Mars, Crab, etc. There are no means of counter-battery combat against Western artillery systems. That's probably due to the range of the Western artillery systems, which in majority at least outrange the Russian ones. The Russian have some long range too, but they don't have enough. And it's the analysis I saw are that the Western radar, counter-battery radars have a longer range. He's saying that the Russians are already suffering from shell hunger. So despite all those claims that they still have 10 million rounds, if they have, then they are not able to bring it to the front line. In the end, it doesn't make much of a difference if you have millions of shells in depots if the front line doesn't have them. And that at least seems to be the case. And mind you, this is a pro-Russian Telegram channel. And we have a message here of the electronic warfare of the Ukrainian forces affects all radio equipment. At the beginning of the counteroffensive, it was said that the Russian electronic warfare was so good. So either the Ukrainians shifted new means to the front lines, or they received massive upgrades in regards to the electronic warfare within the counteroffensive. Nevertheless, we now get more and more confirmations from the Russian side that the Ukraine's electronic warfare is a serious problem to them. Also, like radio stations adopted do not correspond with the declared data, so I guess they are not can't communicate with them. That might be lost in translation. Outdated tanks, self-propelled guns, means of communication. So the radios inside of their tanks is outdated. The only advanced command staff can use the internet. Basically, only higher ups have access to the internet and use it. And the UAVs that put into service before the war are already outdated and ineffective. And we see like UAV subdivisions only have 10 to 30% of the devices that are meant that they should have. And the needs for troops with thermal imagers inside is covered by 30%. So 70% do not have the necessary thermal imaging devices that they need. Overall, obviously, that's good news for the Ukrainian side. And as said, this is from a Russian insider inside of the intelligence community. So we've seen fairly convincing news from this channel in the past. And we are switching to the Crimean Peninsula. We see the Russians working on a auxiliary bridge for repairs that they built between the two spans. And the interesting part we can see here is that it actually shows us some damage to the rail bridge, while this is the road bridge. And we have now the video of the attack of the drones that are striking. We can see them closing in here. Here's the pillar of the bridge. The drones supposedly have 850 kilograms of explosives, and we can actually see one here. And if you see, this is the car where the parents of a teenager died. It was driving here on the road, and if we look at the road, it seems to actually be that the drone actually came from the Azov Sea, when we see the curvage of it. Here in a moment it'll pop up. There's the wake of the drone hitting. And here we see one hitting the railroad bridge, and we see that actually there was another railroad going through at that very moment, and we see the explosion here. Now, the interesting part, as said, is that we see the strike coming from the Azov Sea, because you see the curvage here. So the strike on the road bridge came from the north, whereas the railroad bridge came from the south. Whether they meant to hit, it might be possible that they were meant to hit the pillar from both sides. That would have made the most sense in my mind, because damaging both a little is obviously far less effective than making one of the pillars completely collapse. Whether 850 kilograms that aren't like shaped charges are good enough for this is a different question, and whether they should try to use more and all of this. But this is a discussion for another time. Interesting, though, is that we saw it actually came from the Azov Sea. at least to my mind, there's no doubt as we see the curvature of the road going basically this way. It was not the camera perspective showing the hit on the road bridge was not between the two pillars. It was clearly on the outside of it. As I said, my interpretation would be that they maybe it crossed through and then meant to hit the pillar from the other side. Or the Ukrainians were so optimistic that they thought one of those drones will be enough to collapse it. So let's collapse both bridges. I said, no clue. Here we have now news about the troop generation. The Rosgvardia is receiving new equipment, heavy equipment, and they are also making ultra-nationalists new commanders. This is a guesswork that this is to fix the ultra-nationalist groups into the Rosgvardia and to help with recruitment. We see here that Zakhar Prilepin is now lieutenant colonel in the National Guard, and he's a former leader of the pro-Russia militias in Donbass. If I'm not completely wrong. We also have news. I already talked about it in the situational picture from yesterday that the Russians have opened the Army 2023 exhibition in Moscow. We have TASS here, the Russian state media, reporting about it. And according to them, 85 foreign companies from 7 different countries are involved. I read about Iran, India, China, and I can't remember the fourth one right now. So basically what we would expect to see there. They're also saying 60 nations are sending personnel. Obviously, this is what roughly a third of the world's population, but at least a third of them is not too shy to send someone to a military exhibition in Russia during a Russian war of aggression. And Russia is claiming that, as we can see here, they think that they'll sign contracts worth 4.34 billion in exports during this mess, right? Even though it sounds different. International Arms Fair. Let's just say fair. That they are optimistic that they'll sign contracts for 4.3 billion during this fair, and we'll have to see, obviously, how much of this will be true. Financial Times is reporting that the US are trying to use the negotiations they're currently having with Iran. There was some exchange of prisoners and some freeing of money. I didn't follow it too closely, but according to them, to the Financial Times, the US are trying to use that negotiations to reduce the delivery of weaponry towards Russia. I have not found that it was successful in any ways. And we have come to the political sphere. Surovikin, General Surovikin, is under house arrest. He was thought to be involved somewhat, or at least knew about the Wagner mutiny, and he's now under house arrest, but he's allowed to receive visitors, so at least in his mind, probably, so he's not in prison. We have news from Germany. Zeitenwende, which is a word you might have heard, even though it's in Germany, seems to already be over. Germany is far away from the 2% BEP, GDP percentage that NATO agreed upon investing on the defense, on each nation's defense. Germany is far away from that, and now the government refused to add it into law that 2% have to be reached. So once the 100 billion extra debt that were taken, which is spread out over several years, so inflation eats and inflation and interests eats away several billion of those, what is left here will be used to boost Germany's defense budget over the 2% for, I think, 3 years or 4 years, and after that there is no guarantee that Germany will be anywhere close to the 2% again. Not much of a surprise in this regard. It was the big surprise that Germany, at least at the beginning of the war, actually claimed they want to achieve the 2%. In Ukraine, we have the news about a Ukrainian former general of the SBU, of the intelligence agency. He was arrested in April 2020 and worked as a spy for Russia for years. He even aided with assassination attempts by gathering information about the subjects, about the targets, and he is sentenced now to 12 years in prison for high treason. And we have news for Ukraine. Germany is delivering Rheinmetall, the defense company, is delivering the Luna new generation reconnaissance system, range of 100 kilometers and 12 hours of flight time. It will reach Ukraine, I think, later this year. And another video of Canadians showing their respect for leaving Ukrainian soldiers after training. As you can see, saluting them and bidding them farewell. And we have here, this is an interesting image. There is a CNN report about Ukrainians using thermal imaging to identify drones. In the video, we see it here, like they go into thermal imaging. The idea is that during dusk and dawn, the temperature difference is vastly different between a metal object and the ground. So that allows them to identify mines that are being positioned there. They say, though, that they can identify some of the mines. Obviously, other metal objects might be as hot as well. And obviously, it should not work under every circumstance. Like brushwork, plants, etc. will have an effect, or at least should have an effect. The interesting part is that they actually claim that they then take out the mines with special explosives or special munition. I have no idea, to be honest, how that's supposed to work well enough. But I guess in the end, any information is better than none. By being able to identify this as a likely minefield, they can prevent them from running into it and finding out the hard way. So whether it's actually possible to clear the minefield just by using items like this and then maybe dropping something from drones is obviously a whole different story, but giving them additional information will be highly useful. And finally, there is mines are an issue, and we have another example here of the Ukrainians having basically converted a regular excavator into a mine flail that is supposed to clear minefields, because huge parts of Ukraine are now mined from shelling from former Russian occupation. And this is an issue not just on the front line. On the front line, they obviously need different items than an excavator. It needs to be armored, whereas here it just needs to protect the crew. But the Ukrainians are working on improvising this and achieving some results in this regard. That was it from me for now. If you enjoyed this situational report, please hit the thumbs up. That really helps with the algorithm. Write in the comment section what do you think about the current deployment of Ukrainian reserves. How much do you expect the Ukrainians will be able to continue with their counteroffensive? Or just write in the comment section that I'm a Russian shill and it hurts me that I have to write Ukrainian successes like I've amusingly found yesterday. Apparently, it's now a thing that I'm a pro-Russian commenter here. Okay. But I think I'll make a separate video about that really soon. Other than that, if you enjoyed this, please hit the subscribe button and hit the bell icon so you don't miss future videos on this channel. This channel is only possible because of the support of viewers like you. If you'd like to support the channel, you can do so by the means in the description. Thank you very much to everyone already supporting me. And that's it from me for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back.